Okay, so you want to understand deep learning, right? Not just the buzzwords, but like the real deal. What's it all about? What can it do? And how does it even work?
Right.
Well, get ready to dive into Deep Learning Minds,
Yes.
a series where we unpack all of that and more. We're talking fundamentals, real-world applications, and even some pretty mind-bending advanced concepts.
Yeah, what's so fascinating to me is that deep learning isn't just about computers.
Right.
We'll be exploring how these principles show up everywhere, from the way our brains work to how life itself evolves.
You've given us some really incredible research to work with for this deep dive, including a conversation with a scientist who studies memory.
Yes?
And not just human memory, but memory in robots, too.
Yeah.
The first thing that really hooked me was this idea that memory isn't just about storing information.
Okay.
It's about actively interpreting it.
Yeah, the paper we're looking at uses this brilliant analogy of a caterpillar transforming into a butterfly.
Okay.
The caterpillar's brain gets completely rebuilt during metamorphosis, yet the butterfly somehow retains memories from its caterpillar life.
So it's not like our brains are just hard drives storing files.
Not at all. Think of memories more like prompts or triggers that need to be actively decoded and reinterpreted in new contexts. It's less about remembering the exact details and more about extracting the meaning and applying it to new situations.
Okay, so it's dynamic, not static.
Exactly.
But what does this actually look like in our brains?
So imagine this. Every time you recall a memory, you're essentially reconstructing it based on your current understanding, your emotions, even your beliefs at that moment.
It's kind of unsettling, isn't it? Like, how much of what we remember is actually accurate?
Well, it's a question researchers are still grappling with.
Yeah.
But I think for now, the key takeaway is that memory is a much more fluid process than we often realize, and that fluidity is a key part of what makes deep learning so powerful.
This idea of memory as a dynamic process gets even wilder when you bring in this concept of selflets. The scientist in the video describes it as each moment in our lives being like a separate version of ourselves.
It's a fascinating way to think about it.
Yeah.
So from this perspective, memories become messages passed between these different versions of ourselves. Almost like sending emails to our future selves.
Uh-huh. Yeah, like when you read an old journal entry and cringe a little.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what's even more mind-blowing is that scientists have actually managed to transfer memories between animals by injecting brain extracts.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying they can literally take a memory from one animal and put it into another?
Mm-hmm.
How is that even possible?
There's some incredible research happening in this area, and it really challenges our assumptions about what a memory is and where it resides. This suggests that memories can exist and be decoded outside of the original brain that formed them.
That's incredible. This is where things get really interesting for me.
Okay.
If a memory can be transferred like that, what does it actually look like physically?
Yeah.
Is it like a computer file we can just copy and paste?
It's definitely not that straightforward. We're still unraveling the mysteries of memory, but we know it's not simply about specific neurons or synapses.
So if it's not a simple file, what is it? This research also mentioned a bow tie architecture that seems to pop up everywhere from our brains to evolution itself.
Right.
What's the connection there?
The bow tie architecture is a key concept in understanding how deep learning works both in nature and in artificial systems. It's all about compressing complex information into a simpler form, then expanding it back out again in a new context. Think about it like taking a huge detailed image and compressing it into a much smaller file, and then being able to perfectly recreate the original image from that compressed file later.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection to memory here. Are you saying our brains are doing something similar with memories?
Absolutely. And it's not just our brains. This same pattern shows up in how genes work, how organisms develop, even in entire evolutionary lineages. This bow tie strategy seems to be fundamental to how complex systems process information.
Why is that? What's so special about this architecture?
It boils down to two things: efficiency and adaptability. By compressing information, you can store and transmit it more easily. But even more importantly, when you expand that information back out, you can do it in a way that's tailored to the specific situation you're in.
So it's not just about remembering the past, it's about using those memories to solve problems in the present and the future.
Exactly. And this brings us to another fascinating concept, the intelligence ratchet.
Intriguing name. What's that all about?
Think about it this way. Living systems are messy. Our cells, our genes, They're constantly changing, making errors, dealing with unpredictable situations. This forces life to be adaptable. And
Okay.
that very pressure to adapt, to constantly be solving new problems and overcoming new challenges, might be what drives the evolution of intelligence itself.
So the more we have to adapt, the smarter we get. Like a muscle we're constantly exercising.
It's a fascinating hypothesis and one that has a lot of support in both biology and computer science. The idea is that this constant pressure to adapt acts like a ratchet pushing living systems towards greater and greater levels of complexity and intelligence.
Okay, so we've got memories as dynamic prompts, selflets sending messages through time, and this intelligence ratchet pushing evolution forward. My mind is officially blown.
And we're just getting started. What if I told you that some scientists believe the lines between thoughts and thinkers might be even blurrier than we realize?
Wait, are you saying our thoughts could have a mind of their own?
It might sound strange, but it's a provocative idea that's worth exploring.
Yeah.
We'll dive into that more in just a minute.
Okay.
Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Deep Learning Minds. Before the break, we were talking about memories being more like prompts that are constantly being reinterpreted, not static files in our brains.
And how that's not just limited to our brains, right? This dynamic interpretation seems to be happening all over in biology.
Exactly. The research we're looking at highlights how this same principle is at work in the development of our bodies. From a single cell to a complex organism.
It really is incredible how a single fertilized egg can become a human with trillions of specialized cells. It's like, how does it know what to do?
It's a mind-boggling feat of biological engineering. And the key is this ability to remap and reinterpret information. Think about it like this. The cells aren't just blindly following a fixed blueprint. They're responding to signals, learning from their environment, and constantly adapting their behavior based on those signals.
Could you give me an example of how that works?
Sure, scientists have done these fascinating experiments with frog embryos. They took a developing eye from a tadpole and transplanted it to its tail.
So the eye ended up on the tail. Did it still work?
It did. Not only that the tadpole was able to learn to use this tail eye to navigate and catch prey, it's a remarkable demonstration of how adaptable biological systems can be.
That's wild. But how does this connect back to memory? It seems like more of a developmental thing.
The connection lies in the way both processes rely on interpreting and responding to information. In the case of the eye, the cells are remembering what to do based on the signals they receive, even in a totally new location. It's similar to how our brain cells form connections and pathways based on our experiences, creating a network of memories.
So our cells have a kind of memory too. That's making me rethink what memory even means.
It's a fascinating concept to consider. This ability to adapt and learn is happening at every level, from individual cells to entire organisms. And speaking of adaptation, it ties back into that intelligence ratchet we talked about earlier.
Right, the idea that the pressure to adapt is what drives the evolution of intelligence. Can you remind me how that works again?
Sure. Think about the challenges life throws at us: a changing environment, predators, even random mutations in our own bodies. Those who are most adaptable, who can learn and change, are the ones who are more likely to survive and pass on their genes.
Survival of the fittest, but in terms of adaptability, not just strength or speed.
Precisely. And this intelligence ratchet doesn't just apply to individuals, it acts on entire species, pushing them towards greater complexity and intelligence over generations.
So it's like the whole biosphere is constantly learning and getting smarter.
You could say that, and it all goes back to this incredible power of deep learning, taking information, interpreting it, and using it to solve problems and adapt to new situations.
It's starting to feel like this bow tie architecture is everywhere, like some kind of universal code.
It's a powerful concept that goes beyond biology. The paper actually gives examples of how this compression and expansion of information plays out in language art, even in the scientific process itself.
Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that.
Well, think about language. We take complex thoughts and emotions and we encode them into a string of words. Those words are then decoded by the listener, who reconstructs those thoughts and emotions in their own mind.
It really is remarkable that language works at all. I mean, how can a few squiggles on a page or sounds in the air convey so much meaning?
It's a testament to the power of shared context and interpretation. Both the speaker and the listener are actively involved, using their knowledge, experiences, and even their cultural background to make sense of those words.
It's like a dance between two minds trying to understand each other.
That's a great way to put it. And we see the same dance happening in art. An artist takes an idea or emotion and expresses it through a painting, a sculpture, or a piece of music. The viewer then interprets that work, bringing their own unique perspective to the experience.
So the meaning of a work of art isn't fixed. It's created through this interaction between the artist and the viewer.
Exactly. And it's the same principle at play in science. Scientists compress their observations and data into theories and models. These models are then shared, tested, and refined by other scientists, building a collective understanding of the world.
It makes you realize that we're all part of this vast network of knowledge, constantly learning and building upon each other's ideas.
And it's all thanks to this ability to compress and expand information, this fundamental process of deep learning that seems to be woven into the fabric of reality.
It really is like we're all deep learning machines, whether we realize it or not.
That's a great way to think about it. The more we understand about how deep learning works, the better equipped we are to harness its power for positive change.
So before we move on, what's the most important thing for our listener to take away from this part of our deep dive?
I'd say the key takeaway is that deep learning isn't limited to computers or algorithms. It's a fundamental process that's happening all around us, shaping our bodies, driving evolution, influencing how we communicate and understand the world.
It's like we're living in a giant deep learning network. But this conversation's also made me wonder, if deep learning is so pervasive, does that mean there's more to our thoughts than we realize?
That's an excellent question, and it leads us into the most mind-bending part of our deep dive. We'll explore the idea that thoughts themselves might have a kind of agency, a kind of intelligence of their own.
I can't wait to dive into that. This is where things start to get really philosophical, right?
It is. But that's what makes it so exciting. We're about to explore the deepest mysteries of the mind and the universe. Stay tuned for the final part of our deep dive.
All right, we're back. And wow, my mind is already swirling from that last conversation. Deep learning happening everywhere, from our cells to entire ecosystems. It's a lot to take in.
It is.
But now we're getting into even deeper territory. This idea that thoughts themselves might have a kind of agency.
Yes.
That they could be more than just passive data in our minds.
It's a mind-bending concept, for sure. But that's what we're here for, right? To explore the frontiers of what we know about ourselves and the universe.
Exactly. So let's talk about thoughts as agents. What does that actually mean? The scientist in the video uses that phrase, but I'm not sure I fully grasp it.
He's suggesting that we need to move beyond this idea of the mind as a computer, where thoughts are like files stored on a hard drive. Instead, he proposes we think of the mind more like an ecosystem.
Okay, I like that analogy. Lots of different things interacting in complex ways.
Exactly. In an ecosystem, different organisms interact, compete for resources, cooperate, even evolve over time. What if our thoughts are like those organisms constantly interacting and influencing each other?
So instead of static files, our thoughts are more like dynamic entities, almost with a life of their own.
Some researchers believe that that's a more accurate way to understand how our minds work. Some thoughts are more persistent than others, some are more influential, and some can even replicate and spread like memes.
That makes me think about those catchy songs that get stuck in your head like earworms. Are those like thought viruses then?
You could think of it that way, but it's important to remember that these thought agents, as we're calling them, aren't necessarily bad or malicious. They can be incredibly beneficial, too.
Okay, so how can a thought be beneficial?
Yeah.
Give me an example.
Think about creativity. A new idea, a flash of inspiration that could be seen as a thought agent emerging from the complex interactions of existing thoughts and experiences. If that idea is compelling enough, it can spread to other minds, inspiring new creations and innovations.
Wow, so you're saying that human culture itself, all the art, technology, and knowledge we've accumulated, could be seen as the result of these thought agents interacting and evolving over time. That's a pretty profound idea.
It is. It raises some fascinating questions about the nature of consciousness and creativity. If our thoughts can have this kind of agency, this ability to influence and shape the world around us, then what does it even mean to be an individual?
That's a really big question.
Hmm.
Are you suggesting that we're not really in control of our own minds? That these thought agents are calling the shots?
It's not necessarily about control, but about recognizing the complexity of our own minds. Our conscious awareness is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole universe of unconscious processes happening beneath the surface, shaping our thoughts, feelings, and actions in ways we might not even be aware of.
So maybe it's less about being the captain of our mental ship and more like being aware that there's a whole crew working down below, keeping things running, and these thought agents are part of that crew.
That's a great way to think about it. And understanding how these thought agents work, how they interact and influence each other, could be the key to unlocking new levels of creativity, problem-solving, and even understanding ourselves better.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into deep learning minds, what's the one thing you want our listener to walk away with today?
I hope they come away with a sense of wonder and curiosity about the incredible complexity and potential of their own minds. Deep learning isn't just something happening in computers, it's happening with each of us all the time. It's shaping who we are, how we think, and how we interact with the world.
It's a humbling and inspiring thought. And on that note, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into deep learning minds. We'll be back soon with more explorations into the frontiers of knowledge. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep exploring the infinite possibilities of the universe.